G'day, mates, folks. Just before we start this episode, this is a few trigger warnings. There's lots of different things. We talk about some very serious issues in this episode. It's also a good chat. It's a wonderful chat, but also suicide, brown, and death, and it can get a bit darker points, but it's also a very positive story. So I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Footy with Mates. I've gone very far this weekend to find a guest. They were hard to get to. Actually, this person demanded to be a guest because he wanted to talk about something. His name is Tom.
Hello, everybody.
Tom, you have asked to be the mate this weekend because we've had Marnie do it.
Yep.
We had Jared Waitley do it.
Yep.
And now you. Why?
Okay, so straight up the top, I'm going to say a few things. One, that this is probably not going to be your usual fun, silly footy podcast.
It's not going to be entertaining?
I think less entertaining and more
Educational?
Educational.
Or informative?
Yeah, and before we get into it, I should do just a little content warning.
Yes.
Can talk about hospitals, death, chronic pain, chronic illness, depression, and, a little bit of brown as well, because today we're talking about Crohn's disease. And
why are we talking about Crohn's, Tom?
Talking about Crohn's disease because I have Crohn's disease. And I know what everyone's saying. They're saying, Tom, Broden, this is a silly, fun podcast. Why do you want to talk about Crohn's disease? And I have 3 very clear reasons why I wanted to talk about it. One, I think not a lot of people know about Crohn's disease and what it is.
Yes.
I think also it's what people term an invisible disease or an invisible disability sometimes even. And I think
you don't have crutches.
I don't have crutches. I don't have anything that's visible.
Right.
And I would say I never have ever spoken about this publicly, and I rarely speak about it personally. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get into later, but I think it is important. I think we have a lot of young listeners.
Yes.
And I think when I was young, and I'm going to tell my whole story, and you'll hear just how fucking stupid and ignorant and silly I was.
Yes.
And I look back and I think a lot of it was because I was just a young, silly person. And we have a lot of young, silly listeners.
Yes.
So I wanted to speak to these people directly.
Great. I think this will be good.
And then the third reason I wanted to talk about this is because I'm in Facebook groups. Like I'm in the support networks for people with Crohn's and also ulcerative colitis, which is what Jake Waterman has.
What's it called?
Ulcerative colitis.
Ulcerative colitis.
Yeah. And I would say that there's a lot of despair, genuinely.
Right.
And I feel like, and I'm going to struggle not to cry this whole time.
Yeah, that's all right. Please do.
But I feel like take a second.
That's all right. Please.
I feel like at one point I was super low, and I've got out of it. I think one time I thought I'd never be able to perform again. I'd never be able to travel. I wouldn't even be able to leave the house. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so early in the chat and we're already getting emotional. But this is a side that I care about.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people who are so sad. And, I was so sad for a bit, but I've managed to do so many things I wanted to do I never thought I could do.
Yep.
So hopefully by sharing how I feel, people will take hope from that.
Yes, I think that's good, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking about it.
Thank you, mate.
We've only talked about it once or twice before. So, I'm excited to talk about it.
I never really share stuff at all. So, it's a new thing for me.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just on that. So there's Crohn's. What's ulcerative colitis?
So I think essentially Crohn's is just inflammation in a part of the bowel. And I think ulcerative colitis is very similar in that way.
It's right. It causes inflammation and ulcers in the digestive tract.
So I think the treatments are often similar, and in the Crohn's groups on Facebook, it's full of people with UC as well.
Yeah, right.
So that's
they're kind of
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the times it is different, but it is treated the same.
They're up and right. Okay, great. So where do we start?
So we started when I was 20, or 21, I think. So I was playing in a rock and roll band. Mm-hmm. Broden was a serious actor.
A little bit. Oh no, go on, please.
No, please. No Auntie Donna yet.
Well, I was going to say you were at drama school before this, and you were quite a lean boy, and then you started to fluctuate in weight really quickly.
Yeah, totally.
At the time, I thought it was because one time I saw you eat, like we had KFC, and then you ate apple crumble.
Yeah.
And you were the first, and there was chocolate custard and there was vanilla custard. And I was like, which one? And he's like, just put both on. And I was like, maybe that's why he fluctuates in weight so much. But then what was revealed, that wasn't the case, or it was not entirely the case.
No, not entirely the case. And like that, I think that's important context to everything. I would say up until 20, you know how you talk about people that had like the invincibility complex. That was definitely me. I fucking smoked whatever I wanted. I drank whatever I wanted. I put all sorts of stuff in my body. I did whatever I wanted. I ate whatever I wanted, and I did not take care of myself. And I think that's the first thing we should just put out there.
Yeah. But you were very young.
I was very young and very silly. Like, we moved out of home super early in retrospect. Like, I think most of our friends moved out a bit later in life, but we were out at 18, living our life in Ballarat. But it all just sort of started where I remember so clearly where it started for me. It was like I used to take my Coles uniform to work with me, right? Because I used to get the trainer. I didn't want to wear Coles uniform on the trainer. It was all very, embarrassing for me at 21 years old. And I noticed that when I was sitting down to change my shoes and I bent over, I would feel queasy in the stomach.
Right.
And for me, that would be like lightheaded. I would feel a little bit sick.
Yeah.
And I would feel just a little bit uneasy, just like squirmish, just from leaning over.
Yeah.
Did I go to the doctor about it? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think the next thing that happened, I sort of noticed, was that I was getting sick all the time. And I think this is what's difficult about invisible diseases as well, is when I talk about being sick, it's not anything I can put my finger on necessarily. I was getting tireder. I was getting more run down. I was sleeping for 12 hours.
Yep.
I was having a fever sometimes. I was just generally unwell, but nothing that you could put your finger on.
Yeah.
And this is where we're going to get into the brown a little bit. So if you're a little squeamish, just turn off for the next 30 seconds. But basically the next thing I noticed, and this is a big part of it as a 21 male. So I want to, as a 21-year-old male, I do want to talk about this side of things.
Yes.
Is I would just take a shit.
Yep.
And then like 20 minutes later, I'd be like, did I wipe my ass? Or like, I feel a little wet down there. And I would go to the bathroom and wipe my bum, and there would be blood on the tissue. And I remember thinking, oh God, that's a bit weird. Do I have like a little cut down there or something? But no pain in that area. And I remember I went to one of my housemates and I said, hey, do you ever like get blood, after you wipe in the ass? And famously my housemate was like, yeah, man, every time we go out for dinner, I fucking, we have a big feed at KFC. I have a heap of blood coming out of my ass. That was our friend Ethan. And I found out many months later that he was joking, but to me, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it is normal to have a bit of blood afterwards. And then the pain started. So I was having blood after I went to the bathroom. I was having queasiness when I bent over. And then I was starting to have pain in like my lower tummy, like basically cramps.
Yeah.
Like really bad sort of cramps. Later in life, when I described it to like friends of mine, they would say, that sounds like period pain.
Yeah.
Like intense stabbing pain, like right in your lower pubic area. Did I go to the doctor? No, I did not. At this point, for context, I don't think I've been to the doctor for like years.
I just remember you for a really long time just being really like sleepy and sweaty and tired.
Yeah, and I think all the way through uni, I never went to the doctor. I didn't have a family doctor. I didn't have someone to see.
And you lived away. You didn't have an infrastructure either. You weren't close with your mum.
No, not at all. Like I didn't have any support network at all. I didn't tell anyone about it.
In a condemned property in Reservoir.
Yeah.
So legitimately like a house that like some old people had died in. Yeah. And then a bunch, you, Zach, Sam, and your mate Ethan moved into this fucked house.
Yeah, with no heating, no nothing. It was crazy. So then eventually like this pain got so bad that I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, what's wrong? And I said, you know, I've got like this pain down here. And that was the first time that I had fingers up the bum from the doctor as well.
Oh.
And it was interesting because I remember at the time, like being so uncomfortable, especially again, like all these issues going on with my body and being a young man and feeling like I was invincible. I was like, oh my God. But I also remember having the fingers up the bum and thinking 50-year-old men get cancer because they refuse to do that test.
Yes.
Like, get your fingers up the bum. It's not that bad.
Was it
I'm telling
right?
you. I've had it every time I've gone to the doctor since. I've had some fingers up the bum. Let's put it that way. It's really not that
Doctors
bad.
know it. They don't make it awkward.
No, they don't make it awkward. It's just part of it. When you have problems down there, that's what happens.
Right.
You know, I would say that if you're scared of getting a rectal exam, then like, things can go seriously wrong down there. So I went to the doctor and I said, I have all this pain here. And they said, oh, it sort of sounds like a UTI.
Right.
Like urinary tract infection. So I did a test and it came back positive for a urinary tract infection. So I went on like Ural, came back to the doctor a couple of weeks later. And I said, I've still got this pain. And they said, oh, we'll do another test. And they ran another test. And they were really on this bladder stuff. And to the point where I had 2 positive UTI tests and then a negative. And it had been like 6 weeks and I still had this pain, even though I'd had all this medication to get rid of it. And they were like, well, we don't know what to do. Like, you know, we thought we were onto it with UTI. They were like, let's go do a bladder test, a bladder scan. So I went and had like this scan where I had to drink all this stuff. You got a full bladder and they do like an ultrasound.
Yeah.
Came back completely negative.
Right.
And like what's important to note, I think, is at this point it might have been like June and these problems had been happening since December. So like
6 months.
6 months of like getting worse and worse and worse, like serious pain. And like, also I know like with the public health system, you'll go to the doctor on Monday, you get a blood test, you go visit on next Monday.
Forever.
Everything just takes a long time. And I didn't even have a doctor, but I did find this doctor who was super passionate and young. They were on placement at my local doctor and they were really passionate about finding out what was wrong with me. So we basically went on this big 3-month grind of like trying to work out what was wrong with my bladder. And everything, I had a CT scan, you know, in the big thing, and they just couldn't find anything. And we discussed everything. And at this point, I was getting blood tests weekly and it was saying like, you're sick, you have serious inflammation markers, like there's something wrong with you, like we can see in your blood test. And I remember the doctor just going to me going, nah, it's not your bladder. Like, is there anything you haven't been telling me, any problems? And I was just like, no, I've been honest with everything. And he goes, anything with like your guts, with your bowel and stuff? And I go, well, there's a little bit of blood after I go to the bathroom sometimes. And he goes, what? Like, you didn't think to mention this? And I was like, you did the rectal exam. Like, I thought it was normal. I didn't know. And he goes, it's that 100%. So then, like, finally we're starting to get on the right path after like so many months of like searching and trying to work out. And all this time, the pain and the sickness is getting worse. And by this point, I was casual at my job, but I was not working anymore. Because I just was calling in so sick that my boss was just stopped giving me shifts. Like, I wasn't working, I was so sick. And me and my mother don't get along on many fronts, but she was, paying my rent for me and supporting me, which was kind of her. And then eventually I went for like an ultrasound of the bowel, which was the same sort of thing where you'd make you drink a lot of fluids and then they can see on your guts. And they sort of said, it was so funny actually, I remember doing it and the person doing the ultrasound was like, hey, so when do you have your next doctor's appointment? And I was just like, I haven't booked it. And they were like, I think you should book your appointment right now and I'm going to give you your results. Wait here for 1 hour and I'll give you your results so you can take it straight to your doctor. And
I think I picked you up.
You might have. It was in Reservoir.
Yeah, I picked you up.
Yeah. And she gave me my results in a sealed envelope and she was like, so take this to your doctor, don't open it to your doctor. So of course the first thing I did is ripped it open and it said like highly likely to have Crohn's disease. And I had never heard of Crohn's disease in my life. I had no idea what it was. And I called my stepmother straight away and then she just broke down. Like my stepmother is a very strong woman.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I think I've got Crohn's disease. It says I've got Crohn's disease. And she goes, oh, no, you don't. And like started breaking down on the phone. And I was like, oh my God, like how bad can it be? You know, because if you Google it, it's just like some inflammation in your bowel. So I went to see my doctor. He gave me the results and he was like, you need to go see like this specialist, like a gastroenterologist basically. So I went to see this gastroenterologist, and again, like,
Can I ask at this point as well?
Please.
Like, in day to day, is it a constant issue or is it just pains?
yeah. So it's interesting because it's like, it's all blended into a big mess. It wasn't like I would sleep, wake up, feel better, then have pain, and then the pain would go away, and then I have a fever. It felt like a big conglomerate of just generally poor well-being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like very hard again because you go to the doctor and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And it's probably what you're going through now with your steroids and everything. Just generally, and they talk about it a lot. The doctors talk about it a lot, like your general health. It's very hard to put a finger on.
Can I ask you another question?
Please go.
Because
Yeah.
I remember being dumb 20-year-old and thinking it's to do with diet and smoking
Yeah.
and all of that stuff that's brought on an illness. That's
Yeah.
not the case.
It's not necessarily the case. Like I think they don't know what causes Crohn's, and there's no cure for Crohn's disease, but there is correlation between Crohn's disease and smokers.
Right.
But that could be, the sort of evidence that it could just be circumstantial.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, there's no proven link there, but there's definitely circumstantial evidence there.
Okay.
And yeah, I wasn't looking after myself, and obviously I'd put off going to the doctors for ages, so things could have been different, but
There's also heaps of people who live very healthy lives who just get
Crohn's as well. Yeah, 100%. And I met a lot of them. So I finally got in to see this specialist, and he was like, yeah, you probably 100% have Crohn's, but we need to go into your bowel, have a colonoscopy, take some biops, take some little samples and double check, because we need to be 100%. And he was like, in the meantime, take these steroids, take a 3 months course of steroids, and you'll be right. And I remember just going home, and maybe my colonoscopy was like in 6 weeks from there or whatever. And one day I just was in so much pain and was in such a big fever that I called my mother and I was like, no, like it's happening. Like I think I'm dying. Like I'm so unwell. I don't know what to do. So she came around to my house, picked me up, went to the hospital. Keen listeners will remember this story from a few weeks ago, but I got into the hospital and they were like, what's your pain? And I was like, really bad, like 7 out of 10. Like, I'm fucking dying here. 7 out of 10. And I'm like, okay, wait there. We waited from like 10 p.m. to like 8 a.m. and we hadn't got in yet. So we went to see my doctor, got an appointment with my doctor. We were never there. And the doctor was like, you march your ass straight back. You're fucking dying. You need to be admitted straight away. So I went into the hospital and got essentially admitted straight away. And like the one positive thing about the public health system is once you're in there, they're so good. I was getting blood test results within half an hour. I was getting all the CT scans and all these scans that were taking months to arrange were getting done on the spot. So basically they said, like you're having such a bad flare-up that your autoimmune system is fighting the disease so hard and the disease is coming back stronger that you're essentially starting to shut down, essentially, like you're starting to get really sick. So I got put on a drip with like steroids, like really strong steroids, and got put on a drip with like, just stuff so you don't have to eat, like stuff to keep you alive. And they took me to a really nice room. I had like a really nice, well-lit room and had a really positive experience in hospital. And after like 2 days of not eating anything, they wouldn't let me eat anything. So there was nothing upsetting my bowel at all. And being on these steroids, I felt $1 million. And I was like, this is great. Like, I want to go home. And it just so happened I got super lucky where the registrar for the bowel ward happened to be the gastroenterologist that I'd gone to see.
Oh.
So on Monday morning, he rocked, like my doctor rocks up at the ward and was like, Tom, what are you doing here? I was like, Steve, what the fuck? And he was like, oh yeah, this is what I do during the day before I see clients, or patients or whatever. And he was like, we're going to keep you here until your scheduled colonoscopy. I'll bring it down for Friday. So I stayed in like the hospital for like a week. They took me to the colonoscopy in an ambulance. So that was fun.
Patient vehicle. Yep.
Yeah. And then they did the scan. Yeah, they went in there, did the biopsy, and he was like, yep, you have Crohn's disease. And then that was supposed to be it. So I sort of went back to my life, but I was still in incredible pain and still really, really sick. But I was on like these autoimmune suppressants that suppress your immune system so it doesn't fight so hard. I was on, this course of steroids. And I just started to get like even worse. Like even though I was supposed to be better, I was getting worse. And again, even after a course in hospital and like all this experience I had gone through, I still did nothing and I did not act on it. And eventually the only reason I acted on it is because my mother, who had been paying for everything, went to Centrelink for me and filled out forms to get like a disability pension, basically for like the 3 months that I hadn't been working.
Yeah.
And she booked like, I had to go in and sign a bunch of stuff. And she basically had booked this appointment for me on like a Tuesday or whatever. And I just couldn't get up that day. I was just exhausted. I slept through it. And she called me and she just fucking lost her shit. She's like, you haven't worked for 3 months. I've been supporting you. You couldn't even go to this fucking meeting. Yeah. And I was like, no, stop, mum. Like, I think I'm fucking worse. Like, I think something's wrong. And she was like, okay, fair enough. Like, after all, she's my mother. After all, she goes, come stay with me. And then I think that very night I woke up at like 3 a.m. screaming in pain, just like the most intense pain. Like it's hard to describe the amount of pain because it's not something that you regularly go through, but pain just beyond pain. So we jumped in the car and went to the hospital. They admitted me straight away and they did scans and they were like, yeah, you've got like a really big abscess in your bowel. Ooh. So basically what had happened is like your bowel gets like inflamed and hot and sticky. And because it's all on top of each other, when stuff's passing through, it sort of rips open essentially. Ooh. And then basically my shit was leaking into my stomach and
sepsis,
the sepsis and made this huge thing.
Fuck.
So they basically said, we got to cut it all out. Yeah. So that was just crazy. That was like just pain. And
you went straight into surgery?
Not straight because I wasn't critical. Like even though you can't live without your bowel, I wasn't dying, you know? So it ended up taking like 3 days for me to go into surgery. And during that time, like someone came to me and they were like, hey, I'm a colostomy bag expert. Like you're going to get a bag, like a colostomy bag when you have surgery. And I was like, no, like you can't give me a colostomy bag. That's awful. And they were like, well, not up to us, your surgeon. It's their decision. And I really didn't understand what it meant, but I just thought that if I got a colostomy bag, that would be the end of my life. I couldn't play guitar again, like I was that was my big focus. And that was a huge mistake as well. Because when my surgeon came to see me the day before my surgery, straight away I said to him, Richard, please don't give me a colostomy bag. And he goes, Tom, I'm cutting out probably a meter of your bowel. Your guts won't work properly. You need to have a bag. Yeah. And I was like, please, I'm in a band. Don't give me a colostomy bag, please. And I feel so silly about that now because like there's so many people with colostomy bags out there who can live such a perfectly normal life. But this was the point where I was like really at my lowest mentally, I guess, because it was like they were bringing me forms that were saying like, hey, there's a chance you'll die in this surgery. Hey, if you don't get the surgery done, you'll die. Sign here. 8% of surgeries go wrong, you know, all this sort of stuff, like really challenging my morality and my mortality, sorry, not my morality. But I still didn't understand what was about to happen to me. So surgeon came, I begged him not to give me a bag, and then I went in for the surgery. And then I've talked so much about pain, right? When I woke up from this surgery, the pain is indescribable. Like just my whole body aching and just a nightmare of pain. And I woke up and I had no idea. Like they probably told me, but I had no idea. And basically from just below like my nipple area to like almost like the bottom of my like pubic area was all had been cut open. And they removed 3 foot of my small bowel, I think, and 2 foot of my large bowel. Yeah. So they basically went in there and cut all the disease out, all the infected area, and they just cut up all of my bowel, chucked it out and stitched it back up. And no bag. I woke up with no bag. And I was like, what? No colostomy bag? What the fuck? But I just remember intense pain. And I had morphine on my right arm, and then they had a clicker for ketamine on my left arm. So you could click it once every minute to get relief. Yeah. And so I was just like clicking like crazy. And I just had no idea that was what I was in for. I just hadn't clocked. I just was so low. And this experience at hospital was just awful this time. Like the ward I was in previously was really nice and it just seemed like well lit and comfortable. This ward was awful. There was like a woman next to me who was just screaming all night long, a dude across from me who had really bad memory loss and ripped out his catheter one night and stuff. And that was the other thing. I woke up with a tube in my stomach and a catheter in my dick, and I had no idea that was going to happen. and just pain. And then for 10 days, I basically was just lying there. They would take me for like, I had to learn how to walk again, basically, because all your stomach muscles have been cut open and stuff. So I would walk up and down the hall with like, you know, walking with the drip, basically. And I just had no idea that this was going to happen. And then like, I remember, and like, again, we're going to go a bit brown here, so skip forward if you want, but I think it's important context, is like they eventually took the tube out of my stomach and the catheter out of my penis, which was a crazy feeling, by the way. If you've never had that done, it's an insane sensation. And so they took everything out of me and they were like, now you can eat again, basically, because I hadn't eaten for like 15 days at this point.
Yeah.
And so I started eating. And then that night, and this is the thing about hospital. When you're there for like 5 days or whatever, it can be manageable. But when you're there for like 15, 20 days, it's just like, it's literally torture because they don't allow you to sleep. Because they wake you up every 2 hours to do your vitals. Yep. So you never get longer than 2 hours. I was in constant pain, constantly on morphine, interrupted by all the people around me, like just no rest. So I woke up at like 3 a.m. I was like, oh my God, I need to take a poop. Like at 3 a.m., like what the fuck? And I called for the nurse like to come help me so I could take a poop. And she didn't come. Like, so I started to get out of the bed and I was just like, needed to go to the bathroom like right now. And then I'd only gone a couple of steps and then I just shit myself like everywhere. Yeah. And I can't express to you the pain of that first shit after bowel surgery. Ooh. Like it was just like blood and mucus and just acid. Ooh. And it hurt so much. And then finally, like I was just standing there basically shaking in pain and just like having shit myself all over the floor. Yeah. Again, 21-year-old, never thought anything would be wrong with me, you know? And then the nurse eventually came, cracked the shits, helped me into the bathroom, sat me in a chair, put the cold water in the shower, left me under the cold shower for half an hour while she went and packed it up. I'm buzzing her to come pick me up. She never come. Just shit like that. Like truly like trauma shit, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was about 15 days and then all the tubes had been taken out. All the staples were still in my stomach and they sent me home. So I went back to my mother's because there was no chance I could go back to my family, back to my rental. And I just started to recover. So I started like basically trying to do exercise every day, starting to try and eat, like ease my bowel back into eating, trying to exercise and stuff. And slowly and surely, I got a little bit stronger, a little bit better. But my bathroom issues never stopped. Yeah. Like I could never do a solid shit again, basically. I was just like always having the runs, basically, in a huge amount of pain. So I got physically better in the sense that I could walk. I remember you visiting me at this point.
At the hospital?
No, at my house in Viewbank.
Well, I was going to jump in and say like, I was just so, I knew you were sick and I knew that you were in hospital having surgery, but I was so unaware of the depth of it. And I was just thinking, it was like before there was group chats and things like that. 'Cause I feel like now you just feel like this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But I feel you just, from my perspective, I just didn't hear from you for a while.
Yeah, no. And it was very much like that. And I remember being in the depths of like pain and like loneliness and despair in the hospital and just wanting someone and texting my ex-girlfriend at the time and saying, please come visit me. And she was like, oh, I'm pretty busy. I don't know if I can. Yeah. And like her just not having no understanding of what I was going through and the pain and the really like the loneliness and the depression. And I just genuinely, I thought at that point that I was going to die. Yeah. Like I was like, I'm dying. Like I'm not going to be able to live my life again. If the surgery doesn't kill me, the illness will kill me. Like my life is over essentially. Yep. But I did get strong enough again, like to go back home. And then basically it was all about like, okay, now you've got to return to work basically. Yeah. Like you've got to start going back on light duties and stuff. But the problem was I was still not able to have a normal bowel movement. Yeah. And that doesn't sound too bad. Like it sounds like, oh, okay, well, yeah, a lot of people have incontinence and manage to live their life. And it's true. If it was just incontinence, you would just chuck on an adult nappy and you would just get on with your life. But the problem with me was when it would come time to go to the bathroom, I would get like a minute's notice at most. And then I would get cramps and pain, like knives in my guts out of nowhere. Just 100% fine, walking along, then bang.
Yeah.
So at this point in my life, I think I shat myself like in public 3 times. One time was really unkind because I was like trying to get back into the gym, and like I never go to the fucking gym, but at this period of my life, I was like, you had to do rehab basically. And I was walking to the gym and I just suddenly felt like, oh my God, I've got to go to the bathroom. Pain. And I walked into like the local, it was like a family, alcohol shop.
Yeah.
And I went in and I was like, hey, I've got this disease and I'm about to poo my pants. Like I'm in pain and can I use your public toilet? Oh, no public toilet here. So then I had an accident in public that time. And then as I started coming back from work, started going to work one time on the train, I realized I needed to go. I was like a minute from a train station. I managed to get to the door. Went again in public, shit everywhere. Luckily, I had my college uniform with me, Just really embarrassing stuff. And at this point, I was just like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I was just in pain.
And that's how I've known you since, you're now someone who likes to have a home base where you are safe. And as a person, you obviously live with the pain and the stress and you have lived with that for over a decade now. But I know you as someone who you find a location where you're at and you just try and stay as close to that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think like the reason I'm telling you all this is because I do want to let people know like how psychologically damaged I was from like still now I have anxieties about this stuff because of these public incidences of essentially shitting yourself. There's not that many social encounters you can embarrass yourself much more than
no, that's the thing with pain or injury, isn't it? Is that you don't know how it is until there's the problem, and then your whole life is kind of mandated by what exactly. So.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think like what really hit me so hard at this point was less so the embarrassment or anything, but I remember I needed to do blood tests like weekly, right? And I went for this blood test once, and the nurse was just a bit of a rookie, and she just stuffed up this blood test, and it hurt a lot, and there was blood everywhere. And I remember just thinking like, I got so upset and so overwhelmed because I was like, I am not normal anymore, or my idea of what normal was. I will never be my idea of healthy again. I will always be different. And the same sort of thing where I realized like one day I forgot to take some medicine. Yeah. And I was so unwell the next day, and I realized, before you could live your life, drink, smoke, eat whatever you wanted, you were fine. Now if you forget your medicine, you're cooked, you're done. So that sense of like real mortality and realizing that you're facing a life of like all this sort of stuff. And eventually, after like a few months of being in so much pain and a bunch of other incidents like the ones I just spoke about, finally went to my specialist and managed to get an appointment. And he was like, yeah, look, we might have to put a colostomy bag in. This is why you should have got a colostomy bag. Yeah. And again, I thought like, how stupid have I been to insist on not getting one when absolutely my bowels do not work anymore. I absolutely should have got one. Like, again, stupid 21-year-old boy just doing absolutely what's not best for him. And my doctor was like, but also there's like this drug, that helps absorb water in the bowel, essentially. And he was like, we can put you on that and see how it goes. And that was my road to recovery. But it wasn't without like, essentially a year of my life of like suffering, of pain, of depression, like low. Like the lows that I've never experienced since. Like just...
You've talked to me about also... Sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
No, please.
But you talk about... people's empathy fatigue.
Yes, so that's an interesting one, and thank you for bringing it up, because I said at the very start, I said I don't talk about this, and I never talk about this in my personal life and in my public life, and there's one reason for it, and basically it's just a little story, and this can be basically our last story, unless you have any questions. But when I started returning to Coles and working a lot more, I was still calling in sick all the time, and even though the doctor said, you're in remission now. Like all the Crohn's has been cut out. You're in remission now. I was still fucking sick all the time. And people really struggled to understand why I was calling this sick all the time and all this sort of stuff. But my boss and one particular friend at work, Kelly, so Gozza and Kelly, were super empathetic and super awesome and super down. And they were fucking legends, yeah? And like anytime I called Goz and said, Goz, I'm not feeling well. I can't work. No worries, mate. No, all good, Tommy. And I remember one time we went for a smoko, mid-morning smoko. And I think Kelly was not feeling well. And she was talking about how wasn't feeling well. And I said, me too. And I started talking about how I felt and like how sick I'd been. And I just saw Kelly barely blink and she just stared straight ahead, having a cigarette. And I looked at Gozza and he didn't roll his eyes, but he almost rolled his eyes. And then it all came crashing down on me. I realized like in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm the boy who cried wolf. Like these people have been listening to me talk about how sick I am and how unwell I am. And I've been calling in sick so much for 3 months that they're over it. They're essentially over it. And I had no judgment for them. I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like they've given me so much empathy that they have stopped being able to summon that empathy every time I spoke about being sick. So from that moment on, I stopped talking about it. I just never mentioned it again. Only very rarely in conversation would I bring it up. Like if someone opened up to me about their health issues, I would open up about it. And yeah, I would just like to the boys, like if we're touring with Auntie Donna or whatever, if I was ever really unwell that they needed to know, I'd just be like, boys, I'm Crohn's and up here. But I would never, talk about it or be open with it because I just felt like it's been 13 years now and people can only handle so much. And I think that's probably not a great thing on my behalf. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Like I think like I've managed to maintain like bubbly, fun, healthy relationships because of just never speaking about it because it is fucking heavy and stuff. But it's also like I guess it's a little bit like repressed now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I think potentially there's fatigue as well for you from having to explain it to people as well.
Yes.
Because I think we'll often be in places and you'll be like, I need to go to the bathroom now, but I don't want to be rude to the Burger King people. I'll go fucking tell them you have Crohn's and you need to use it right now. And and they have to let you in. But you don't want to have to go through that again and again and again.
Yeah, and that's not my personality either, right?
Yes,
like
right.
I'm not a strong person in those situations like you are.
Yeah.
But I think, the reason I just wanted to lay all that out and tell my stories. Well, one, I just got so I've been in remission for 13 years and I just found out literally the last couple of weeks that Crohn's is back. So now all of a sudden they basically cut it all out. I didn't have it for 13 years. I was just dealing with essentially post-surgery symptoms. And then now they've gone for a colonoscopy because my iron was really low. They were trying to find out where are you bleeding from? Like if your iron's getting lower and you can't replenish it, you must be bleeding somewhere. So I went in to have a look and they're like, we can see inflammation on your bowel where your surgery scars are. So your Crohn's is back. And then that's been really crazy for me, I guess.
So they found little marks of it and potentially that there's stuff that needs to be looked at there.
Yeah. So they're basically if you find erosions and inflammation in your bowel, you have Crohn's. So that's what they found that hasn't been there for 13 years.
But you've been living, in remission with it for 13 years.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say on the first half is what you were able, from where you were at 21 when you thought you were going to die and you was changing your whole life, was for 13 years to watch you be able to go on tour around the world and make music and score things and buy a house and have a kid and is fucking huge. So
and
that's great.
Genuinely, I see so much pain and despair from people going through this stuff. And I just want you to know that if you're listening that, you can get through it. Hopefully, maybe not. Things are really difficult. It very depends on the situation. But I was able to deal with all that we just spoke with and still, do all the things that Broden said.
And the second thing I want to say is, and we were talking about it the other day in the office, is you're not in the same position you were when you were 21, when you first found out you had it. You're in a very different situation now.
Yeah.
You know so many more things.
Yeah, we're going to treat it differently. I can have so many options. We're on it early this time.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Any young people out there listening, men, women, any gender, but if you're like me, you were a stupid young man and you were scared to go to the doctors or scared to have fingers up your bum or whatever, listen to me now and go to the fucking doctor. Like, trust your medical people. Because if we had have acted early on my stuff, I might never have got that bad. Yeah. In fact, no, like that's a fact. It never would have got as bad as it did. I never would have had to have surgery. I never would have had to have any of that happen to me.
If you reckon if you just went to the doctor straight away?
Yeah, and like often in this case there are, like I think my story of misdiagnosis is not uncommon.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Like, how do we know?
Because until they go up there with a camera and a knife, they actually don't know.
Yeah.
But if you can get that colonoscopy booked in ASAP, then yeah. But it goes with anything, right? Like you got a funny feeling in your elbow and you're just ignoring it, you could make it worse and something really bad could happen to you. So please, go to your doctor.
Do you think this is all the reason for the downfall of your rock and roll band, Napoleon and Rags, or are there other reasons?
Like legitimately. So before I had surgery, I was so sick that we had to stop performing. So we trained up Broden as the lead singer in my place.
That was a wisdom tooth though.
Was it?
Yes.
Was it
Don't
really?
blame Crohn's on me
Because
singing.
I remember a gig where remember when they put me in a chair with a blanket at the gig?
No.
And you sang?
Oh yeah, but you just get us up all the time and sing. Yeah. But no, I think I very, very good of you to share that, Tom.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like very anticlimactic now that I've told the story, but I definitely feel like hopefully it's helpful for...
No, I think people will really enjoy this.
Yeah, hopefully. It's just a story, I guess, my story.
Yeah.
That I never speak.
Well, it's your continuing story.
Yeah.
But I think you'll get a lot of good feedback from it, and share the love to Tom when you listen to this. Any advice for yourself? What's your advice for yourself?
I think definitely... you know what? Like a lot of this is mental health stuff. Like as much as we spoke so much about medical stuff, I think, like I still have ongoing trauma from all of that, like that year of my life, and I wish that I had dealt with that better.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I can control. And that was the one thing that saved me in the end, because like, I mean, quick story. We got time for a quick story. Yeah. But basically, I was 21-year-old, had gone through all of this. I was getting better physically, but emotionally I was distraught. I could not leave the house. I was just like at the lowest of low, and I thought about ending it a few times. Like I thought, like I can't. I want to live till 80. Like I can't go through 60 years of this pain and embarrassment and suffering. Like I don't want to be here anymore. And it's so funny, the thing that like I really wanted at 21, and I think a lot of our younger listeners will resonate with this, is I just really wanted a partner, like someone to date, someone to love. That was probably the most important thing to me. And just by happenstance, I met a girl, right? And Broden knows who I'm talking about, and he'll laugh. But she really was my guardian angel, and she really saved my life, because I started dating her, and I would share a lot of my stories with her and share a lot of like how I was feeling. And I was like, to her one time, I remember very clearly, I was like, I don't think I can share a bed with a woman again, because I'd be so worried about shitting myself in the sleep or whatever. And she was just like, and? But not in a dismissive way, but in like a... like an incredibly supportive, like belittling way, in a good way. Yeah. And she goes, shit yourself then. We'll change the sheets, mate. No worries. She goes, I get diarrhea all the time. I might shit the bed. So what?
Yeah.
And like,
what a huge thing that is.
Yeah. Like, it sounds so silly, but to me, it was this beautiful woman that I really wanted to be with. And she was just so, no worries. We'll deal with that. And she really
used to, well, you used to say a lot. You used to lean on this a lot, and it was concerning to hear. But you'd be like, "I accept death." You would say stuff like that. You were like half joking, but also there was this mentality of you're like, "Well, I don't know, and I'm going to die now."
Yeah,
so you would treat a lot of your life like that. And I've noticed the change with Atlas and with Elle that you don't say that anymore. Yeah, and that's I think so good.
Yeah, and I think a trigger warning, again, for suicide and stuff, but when I was at my lowest and I realized that I could end it if I wanted to, that actually gave me an enormous amount of peace personally. I was like, oh, if I don't want to, I don't need to do this. Like in a euthanasia sort of way.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because when I came to this realization that if I couldn't handle it, I didn't have to, it brought me this peace. And I remember calling up Broden and being like, hey, if I die at my funeral, you've got to perform Purpose from Avenue Q at my funeral. And I took great joy in this. And yes, it probably gave me a really bad attitude to life where I was just like, okay, I've accepted now. I'm chill. Like, it's fine. If this is too much, I'll end it and fucking YOLO, whatever. And yeah, that's probably not a positive thing either, but that's how I sort of dealt with it for a long time. And yes, now my prerogative is to live for as long as possible because of a beautiful baby boy.
Yes. Well, that was different to the chat we had with the Marmalade Boys.
Yeah, I don't know how people will respond to this. Hopefully, well.
Oh, they'll like it very much so. You're very eloquent when you want to be.
Yeah. Oh, I can talk when I get going for sure.
I hope this opens the doorway for people to not shit on you for saying that Nick Dacos is a halfback and go, well, maybe he had other stuff going on.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the thing, isn't it? You never know what someone's going for because of invisible
diseases. I think you'll find that this is people's favourite chat in a long time. So thank you for sharing it, Tom.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Now you go edit this.
Yeah, I will.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back for football chat on Monday. Until then, bounce that pill.